Call this hearing to order. I want to wish you all a good morning, and I want to welcome you to the Senate and House Veterans Affairs Committee hearing. I am honored to welcome the national leadership of the Disabled American Veterans, and I want to extend a special welcome to the DAV members who travel across this nation to be here, particularly those who have traveled from the great state of Montana. We are fortunate to have Joe Parsetich, a Montanan and DAV's former national commander here, Kevin Grantier, who is commander of Montana DAV, Chase Natalie, adjutant of the Montana DAV. Thank you for being here, gentlemen. We appreciate it. Each of us can always count on the DAV to let us know how Congress can best support our nation's veterans. DAV has been integral in helping us pass life-changing legislation like the Deborah Sansom Act, the Hannon Act, and most recently, the PACT Act. DAV was at the forefront of the effort to ensure members of Congress did the right thing for multiple generations of toxic-exposed veterans and survivors by passing the PACT Act. This came as no surprise, as this was not the DAV's first rodeo. DAV has been helping Congress pass legislation to support veterans and their families for decades. That's why I'm proud to have DAV support for one of my top priorities this year, passing the Major Richard Starr Act to help deliver combat-injured veterans their full DOD and VA benefits. We've also been working in a bipartisan and bicameral way to improve VA's community care programs, respond to the mental health needs of our veterans, and bolster long-term care services for aging and disabled vets. That legislation, the Senator Elizabeth Dole 21st Century Veterans Healthcare and Benefits Improvement Act, will help our veterans access the care, benefits, and services they need and deserve. And we'll need the continued support of DAV to help get it over the finish line. We hold DAV's views in high regard here, and we'll look to you to ensure that we have our priorities straight. So thank you for being here. Now I want to turn it over to Chairman Bost, who I want to personally thank for him holding down the fort and chairing a good portion of yesterday's VSO hearing. Thank you, Chairman Bost. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chairman Tester, and good morning to all of you, and thank you for being here. I'd like to thank the DAV's National Commander, Miss Nancy Espinosa. I'm going to say it correctly. Espinosa. Yes. All right. That's pretty good for a deep Southern Illinois boy. For being here today. Thank you. And I would also like to give a shout out to DAV's Auxiliary National Commander, Anna Marie Hurley, and thank you also for being here. And I'm pleased that there are folks here from the great state of Illinois as well. If you'd raise your hand, we want to recognize you. Yeah, right. From Union, Illinois, we want to also especially welcome Don Holen from my district, and thank you for being here. Thank you for traveling here from our home state, and please, I already recognized you, so being chairman of this committee is very, very personal to me. And I want to explain that. I explained it to the group yesterday. I'm a Marine. There's an URA out there. Yeah, okay. And my grandfather on my mother's side was a Korean War Marine. My uncle was a Vietnam Marine, a victim of the ultimate oxymoron, friendly fire. He did survive, but got hit in 1965, came home, woke up in Virginia about 5 weeks later, but at any rate, got a 100% disability, but had a very successful life thanks to the VA. My son is a lieutenant colonel at this time and is a JAG. My grandson is an F-18 mechanic in Miramar, California. My dad's side of the family, they were all Army. We won't hold that against them. So as you can tell, it's really, really personal to me to make sure we're providing for you. And we want to say thank you for the sacrifices you've made, especially this group. All veterans we want to say thank you to, but especially this group. Each of you have fought to protect our constitutional rights. However, for far too long, veterans who were merely needed a fiduciary from the VA to help them manage their benefits, including disabled veterans, have been wronged for about 30 years. For years, VA has automatically stripped veterans with fiduciaries of their Second Amendment rights, their constitutional right they actually fought to keep in place. Now, I'm proud to report that the FY 2024 Milcon VA Appropriations Act, which was recently passed the House just yesterday, will now protect all veterans' constitutional right to bear arms. By incorporating a bill that I have championed for years, and I thank Senator Moran and Tester for their work with me to get this fixed, and know that I will continue to ensure we enact a permanent fix. DAV plays a vital, important role to making sure we meet the needs of disabled veterans. You, like me, understand the struggles veterans and their families and their survivors have. You know where the VA is falling short. DAV is a great advocates here in DC and across the country to make a difference for our veterans. You have my commitment that we will continue to fight for you and the voices you represent just as hard as you fought for us. As you all know, the PACT Act is the largest expansion of health care and benefits for the veterans and their families in recent history, and we're going to make sure VA gets it right. And when they make mistakes, I'll be the first one to hold them accountable and get answers back to you. Looking ahead, I'm focusing on making improvements where we can to modernize VA's delivery of health care services. We made great progress improving the VA claims and appeals process when we passed the Veterans Appeals Improvement and Modernization Act. But we must make sure VA is providing veterans with the high-quality disability compensation exams and timely decisions on their claims that they've earned. And we're going to keep pushing to make sure veterans can get the help that works for them and where they need it and when they need it. The bipartisan negotiations we're in right now to get a package of veterans bills to the President's desk will help us do that. This comprehensive package includes things like the Dole Act, Vet Tech, and Home Act. Strengthening the community care program, the Dole Act would put veterans in control of where they want to live out the days of their lives. The Home Act would help homeless veterans. And the expansion of the successful Vet Tech pilot program would help veterans find high-paying jobs and more. We will get this package done in the coming weeks. Now, you may hear some discussion from my colleagues on the other side of the aisle that the House Republicans are somehow holding up this legislation. Nothing could be further from the truth. As long as I'm chairman, I will continue to work with my colleagues in both chambers to find bipartisan solutions to the problems regardless of the action of others. Disabled veterans and all veterans deserve nothing less. But make no mistake, our work is nowhere close to being finished. And my door has and will continue to always be open to you. I promise to keep up the fight. We are all in together. And now it's time to take our foot off now's not the time to take the foot off the gas. And I will ensure you that the VA gets the budget it needs to complete its goals. Now, I look forward to this meeting today and working on this mission alongside you. And I want to thank you again for being here today. And with that, I yield back.
I want to recognize Ranking Member Jerry Moran.
Chairman Tester, thank you. Chairman Bost, Ranking Member Takano, my House and Senate colleagues, it's a pleasure to be here with the DAV. Commander Espinosa, you should know that your team represents not only you, but disabled American veterans and veterans generally across the country in a very admirable way and a very effective way. Their voice matters, it's heard, and it's acted upon. And I want to thank all of you for being here today, and thank particularly my Kansas members of DAV. Had an enjoyable and valuable visit with them yesterday, and I look forward to hearing what is said this morning in today's hearing. This is a valuable hearing, and the time that you are with us is something that we cherish. Lots of critical pieces of legislation. I would highlight, as the chairman said, I was impressed, and members of DAV and the veteran community should be impressed really with all the work of our veteran service organizations when it came to the PACT Act, but particularly DAV was a leader in that effort, and absolutely as a result of DAV's efforts, that PACT Act was able to advance, something that has been talked about and worked on for a long period of time, but without the success that we saw now just a little more than a year ago. I look forward to hearing what you have to tell me today. I would guess that you have suggestions how we address the backlog of disability claims within the department. Too many veterans are waiting far too long to receive the benefits. This backlog not only delays critical support for those who need it, but also creates unnecessary stress and so much uncertainty in veterans and their families' lives. Mental health remains a critical concern. PTSD, depression, substance abuse, and our continued battle against veteran and military suicide. And finally, I appreciate DAV again for always being at the forefront of caregivers, family members, and in this case, our efforts with Senator Dole to see that we provide support for those who provide selfless care for ill and injured veterans. These caregivers play a vital role in recovery and well-being of our veterans, and yet too often lack the recognition and support they deserve. I'm anxious to hear what DAV thinks that VA can do to make certain that caregivers fulfill that essential role. And again, I thank you all for being here, and I look forward to working with you, continuing to work with you as we care for those who served. Thank you.
I now recognize Ranking Member Takano.
Well, thank you, Chairman Tester, and thank you, Ranking Member Moran and my colleague, Chairman Bost. I'm happy to join all of you this morning in this hearing. And I'm honored to gather this morning with members of the House and Senate committees on Veterans Affairs, and we look forward to hearing from the National Commander and representatives of disabled American veterans about your legislative priorities for the second session of the 118th Congress. First of all, let me get an important piece of business out of the way. Are there any Californians in the room this morning? All right. Well, I'd like to give a special shout out to DAV's Junior Vice Commander, Dan Contreras from California. Welcome, Dan, and welcome DAVers from California. We convened this hearing with a deep sense of duty and commitment to the brave men and women who have served our nation. We must not waver in our commitment to ensuring that they're able to access to health care and benefits they have earned. I look forward to discussing DAV's legislative priorities this morning, and may your insights, experiences, and advocacy efforts serve as guiding lights to my colleagues and me as we fulfill our legislative and oversight responsibilities through the remainder of the 118th Congress. And after reviewing your written testimony, Commander Espinosa, it is clear that DAV's priorities align with many of my own. I share your commitment to reducing veteran suicide, increasing access to VA health care, and ensuring faithful implementation of the PACT Act. We must also make VA a more welcoming and safer place for veterans of all backgrounds and ethnicities. Last week, DAV published a new report, Women Veterans, The Journey to Mental Wellness. This is the third report about women veterans that DAV has published since 2014. I cannot thank you enough for the important contributions you have made through these reports, which have contained dozens of policy recommendations. We made important strides with the enactment of the Deborah Sampson Act 3 years ago, but more work remains to be done, and your new report will help guide further improvements. The best way for us to honor the legacy of veterans and their survivors is to translate our words into meaningful action that uplifts and empowers those who have given so much in service to us all. I wish we in Congress had more to show for ourselves in terms of legislative productivity in the 118th Congress. Unfortunately, legislation like the HOME Act and the Elizabeth Dole Home Care Act are currently being held up by those whose priorities lead to privatization of veterans' health care, enrichment of special interest groups, and the hollowing out of the VA healthcare system. I remain very grateful for the overwhelming support that DAV and other VSOs provided in 2022 to pass my bill, the Honoring Our Pact Act, and get it signed into law. Your voices are powerful, and we look to you to guide us in our policymaking. And as we approach the 2-year anniversary of the enactment of the PACT Act, I look forward to working with DAV to continue to strengthen and protect this landmark law and ensure the more than 3.5 million veterans living with the effects of toxic exposure can receive the maximum benefits and comprehensive health care they've earned. As part of these efforts, the Biden administration recently announced it is accelerating the timeline for veterans who were exposed to toxins to be eligible to enroll in VA health care. That means, as of this Tuesday, any veteran who was exposed to toxins or hazards has access to the effective, affordable, and quality health care that VA can offer without having to apply for disability compensation first. This is a huge deal, and I want to be very clear that it is due in no small part to the advocacy of the VSO community. I look forward to continue my work with my colleagues to make sure this transformational law is implemented effectively. This includes protecting the Toxic Exposure Fund, the mandatory funding mechanism that makes this law possible. I've said it before, and I'll say it again. Toxic exposure is a cost of war. We must vigorously resist any attempts to return to the bad old days where veterans' health care was fully funded through discretionary appropriations, pitting veterans against each other and against other discretionary spending programs. In closing, I look forward to hearing DAV's testimony today, and thank you for your advocacy and support for the veteran community, and I yield back the balance of my time.
It is now my honor to welcome to the joint House and Senate VA Committee my friend and colleague, Senator Mitt Romney, and I'm just going to tell you, Mitt, you'll never address a finer group of House and Senate members than you're about to address now. And he is here to introduce Commander Espinosa.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, a good friend. I'm not sure I agree entirely with your assessment of the entire panel, but I'll take it into consideration. Thank you. I appreciate the chance to be here with you today, and I am proud to introduce a fellow Utahn, the National Commander of the Disabled American Veterans, Nancy Espinosa. I've had the pleasure of meeting with Commander Espinosa to discuss efforts to increase our support for disabled veterans. Since 2023, Commander Espinosa has served as National Commander for the DAV. She's a service-connected disabled veteran of the Army and was a member of the Army Reserve from 1975 until becoming an active duty soldier in 1985. 4 years later, she joined the New Mexico Army National Guard and served there until her honorable discharge in 1990. Commander Espinosa is currently a member of the DAV Chapter 14 in Layton, Utah, as well as the Department of Utah Adjutant. She's an active member of DAV's Commanders and Adjutants Association and a commissioner of the Utah Legislative Veterans and Military Affairs Commission. DAV has more than 1 million members across the country. Commander Espinosa understands firsthand the issues that impact veterans. The work she does is vital to ensuring that veterans and their families have access to the benefits they need to live long and full lives. Thank you, Commander Espinosa, for your willingness to appear before the committee today, for your service to our country, and thank you to the members of this esteemed panel.
Thank you, Senator Romney. We appreciate your statement very, very much. Now, Commander Espinosa, I'll turn it over for you for the DAV's opening statement.
Thank you very much, Chairman Tester. Thank you so much for that kind introduction, Senator Romney, and thank you for your dedication to America's veterans. I'm proud to call you a fellow Utahn. Chairman Tester, Chairman Bost, Ranking Members Moran and Takano, and members of the Committees on Veterans Affairs, thank you for providing me the opportunity to deliver the 2024 legislative program of DAV, Disabled American Veterans, an organization of more than 1 million members, all of whom were injured or became ill as a result of their military service. My written statement thoroughly details DAV's key legislative priorities for the 118th Congress and reports on our many programs and accomplishments. So today, I'll highlight some of our most critical policy goals. First, I'd like to start by introducing my DAV colleagues joining me today. National Adjutant Barry Jesenowski, National Headquarters Executive Director Cody Van Boxel, Washington Headquarters Executive Director Randy Reese, National Service Director Jim Marzalek, National Legislative Director Joy Elam, National Voluntary Services Director John Kleindienst, National Employment Director Ryan Burgos, and Auxiliary National Commander Anne Marie Hurley. I also want to recognize the DAV and auxiliary leaders who have been vital to our organization's mission over the course of many years. Let me extend my gratitude to our National Executive Committee and the members of the National Legislative Interim Committee, as well as my Chief of Staff, Floyd Watson Jr., for all of their support. And finally, I want to thank my sons, Ian, who is a Navy veteran, and Eric, who served in the Air Force. While I am surrounded by countless impressive and selfless servants within DAV's ranks, my sons hold the distinction of being my most dedicated and unwavering supporters. Messrs. Chairman, I am a service-connected, disabled Army veteran of the Gulf War era, with a family legacy of military service dating back to the Civil War. My journey began when I responded to an ad for a clerk typist that said no experience necessary. The position turned out to be with the U.S. Army. That call to the reserves launched my 15-year military career. But my service in the Army was marked by obstacles and loss. While on active duty in 1989, doctors told me they found an aggressive cancer that could lead me with just 6 months to live. They operated, and it turned out to be a misdiagnosis. But as you can imagine, the entire ordeal was quite traumatic. Shortly after, I suffered the unexpected deaths of my sister and young stepdaughter in rapid succession. The combined losses and health issues left me in a deep depression. So I took a hardship discharge and transitioned into the New Mexico National Guard to continue my military service. When I separated from the Guard in 1990, I turned to VA for care. Unfortunately, VA was ill-equipped to address my needs as a woman and was not conveniently located, so I didn't start using VA for many years. And I didn't even realize that VA mental health care was an option for my depression. I'm happy to say that today I regularly use VA health care, and overall I'm very satisfied with the quality and timeliness of my care. But my experience of being dismissed and misunderstood by VA was not unique. Women veterans have historically been overlooked and underserved. While VA has made tremendous progress in recent decades in caring for women veterans, there is still much to be done. This is particularly critical now with the suicide rate skyrocketing among women veterans. With more women than ever serving in the military, we must ensure that VA has the resources and expertise to meet all the physical and mental health care needs of women veterans. I'm pleased to announce that just last week, DAV released a new report entitled Women Veterans, The Journey to Mental Wellness. It's our third report focused on women veterans issues in the last 10 years. This time, digging deeply into the unique factors contributing to the staggering rate of suicide among women veterans. We look forward to working with you to begin implementing its 50+ policy and legislative recommendations. Together, we can save lives. Mr. Chairman, DAV is a fierce advocate of the VA healthcare system and its specialized programs. Over the past decade, there has been one consistent trend: an increasing number of veterans turning to VA. Unfortunately, there are still significant staffing shortages and an aging infrastructure that prevents and delays many veterans from receiving the care they need. Congress must ensure that VA has sufficient funding to provide timely, convenient, and high-quality care. Mr. Chairman, we again want to thank you and all the members here today for the historic passage of the Honoring Our Pact Act in 2022. As you may remember, DAV was the first organization to bring the subject of burn pits to light in 2008. But we've been advocating about the harms of military toxic exposures dating back to World War I. We should all celebrate that millions of veterans exposed to burn pits and other toxic substances are now eligible for VA's life-changing benefits and health care. However, many others remain ineligible because their conditions are not currently covered in the law, but are linked to toxic and radiological hazard exposures. If our nation is to provide true equity for all toxic exposed veterans, Congress must enact legislation to recognize the specific exposures and related diseases for veterans who served at K2 in Uzbekistan. Ensure parity for radiation-exposed veterans and address the exceptionally widespread PFAS water contamination. All toxic exposed veterans deserve care now and into the future. In order to build on the success of the PACT Act, DAV and MOA have been engaged in a toxic exposure research project and will soon release a report entitled Ending the Wait for Toxic Exposed Veterans, which includes detailed policy recommendations. We found, on average, it takes more than 30 years for Congress or VA to establish presumptive diseases, such as those for Agent Orange and the PACT Act. These presumptions help to ensure that all veterans receive their earned benefits. No veteran should have to wait 3 decades for justice. Mr. Chairman, DAV knows that service members' families share in the sacrifices made by their loved ones. That's why we fully support the Major Richard Starr Act, the Restore Veterans Compensation Act, the Caring for Survivors Act, and the Love Lives On Act, each of which would remove barriers and correct inequities faced by wounded, ill, and injured veterans and their survivors. With your help, we can and we must get these bills enacted this year. But we know that passing new laws is not enough. We must also ensure that veterans are able to access the services and benefits they've earned. That's why one of DAV's core missions is to provide ill and injured veterans free representation with their benefits claims. With over 1 million veterans choosing DAV to represent them, I'm proud to say we have the largest and best benefits advocacy initiative in the country, second to none. To help veterans access VA health care, DAV operates a national transportation network offering veterans rides to and from VA healthcare facilities at no cost. Last year, DAV volunteers drove more than 575,000 hours, transporting more than 245,000 veterans to their medical appointments, saving taxpayers more than $18 million. We also help veterans achieve economic security through employment support and by empowering veteran entrepreneurs to make the business world accessible to them and their spouses. I'm proud to say that in the past decade, our job fairs have resulted in over 180,000 job offers. Finally, DAV has long advocated on behalf of veterans' family caregivers. They not only share in the sacrifices made by veterans, but also enhance their quality of life. That's why in October, we launched DAV Caregiver Support, a program to provide tailored assistance and resources to those who care for veterans. Through our program, caregivers can access online resources and receive personalized care plans. They also get one-on-one support from a trained specialist. And like all of our services for veterans, DAV Caregiver Support is provided at no cost to the caregiver or the veteran. Mr. Chairman, in conclusion, I'd like to share some words from Thomas Jefferson that are inscribed on his memorial. I am not an advocate for frequent changes in laws and constitutions, but laws and institutions must go hand in hand with the progress of the human mind. As that becomes more developed, more enlightened, as new discoveries are made, new truths discovered, and manners and opinions change, with the change of circumstances, institutions must advance also to keep pace with the times. That statement remains true today as it did more than 200 years ago. Our veterans need a VA that keeps up with the times, and we need you to join with us so that together we can create a better VA that our veterans deserve today and into the future. Mr. Chairman, thank you for the opportunity to testify today. As always, my heart remains with DAV, the men and women who have served our great nation, their families, caregivers, and survivors, and of course, the United States of America. Thank you. This concludes my statement. Oh, wow. Thank you. Thank you so much for coming. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Commander Espinoza. We appreciate those words. There will be 3-minute rounds. I would ask the members obey that as close as possible. I'll be first. 3 years ago, we passed the Deborah Sampson Act, a bill that introduced with Senator Bozeman. It will help eliminate barriers to care and services faced by many women veterans, and it was signed into law. This legislation also helped expand and improved access to care and benefits for survivors of military sexual trauma. The Deborah Sampson Act was a big win, but as DAV notes in a recent report on women veterans, we still have much work to do to improve care for those who have experienced MST. So my question is this to you, Commander. Where is VA currently succeeding in providing care for veterans who have experienced MST, and where can improvements be made?
Thank you very much for that question, Senator. I would like to ask our Legislative Chairman, Joy Elam, to respond.
Thank you, Commander. Thank you. I think one of the key things that is positive is that DOD and VA were starting to work together to address the MST issue. And that's absolutely critical. But we know that far too many veterans, both male and female, experience military sexual trauma. We have to have a culture change, both in the DOD and VA. The positive steps have been made, moving that forward. But there's so much more to do. Especially warm handoffs are so important. Making sure there's care coordinators to address issues with women veterans. and male veterans who experience sexual trauma, trauma-informed care, continued resources to make sure evidence-based treatments are developed. So there are a number of positive things, but we still have a number of issues that we still need to address. And we have to have welcoming, safe environment for all veterans using VA, no harassment, and we have to hold VA accountable for that.
Thank you, Joy, and thank you for the work that you do. On Tuesday, DAV members and other veteran service organizations joined me at a press conference to call for swift passage of the Major Richard Starr Act. Bill has overwhelming bipartisan support and would allow combat disabled veterans to collect their full DOD retirement pay and VA disability pay. And quite frankly, this bill is a no-brainer. So for you, Commander, what would this change mean to DAV members? And why is it so important we get this legislation passed?
That's a very important question, Senator. Thank you for asking. I would like to ask our Service Director, Jim Marszalek, to respond.
Thank you, Commander. Senator, we do support the passage, and like you said, it's a no-brainer. These are combat veterans who suffered significant injuries as a result of their service. They should be able to receive their retirement and their VA compensation separately. Absolutely.
Chairman Bost.
Thank you, Chairman. Commander, after working with Senator Moran and Senator Tester and Speaker Johnson, I was pleased to be able to get the language for H.R. 705 to protect Second Amendment rights of our veterans included in the appropriation bill and considered this week. And I'm grateful for the DAV's support of this issue. And I just want to know if as things move forward, can we continue to count on that support?
Thank you very much for that question, Congressman. DAV believes that veterans must have all their rights protected, including their due process rights, and we support that legislation.
Thank you very much. Commander, also DAV as national services officers have helped other veterans navigate this labyrinth of VA claims appeals process, and it really is a labyrinth. Can you elaborate on the meaningful claims and appeals reform that Congress should support that allows you and helps you work with them to get that done, get their claims processed?
Thank you very much for that question, Congressman. I would like to ask Service Director Jim Marszalek to respond.
Thank you. Great question. At the end of the day, it starts with VA forms and how veterans are introduced to filing a claim for benefits. It's very complex. The complexity of the forms, then the letters they receive as a result of filing those forms, it's complex. We have to start there. There should be no wrong door at VA. It doesn't make any sense to us that a veteran would have to think about what claim they filed 20 years ago in order to determine what form they use. I was just looking at forms the other day through the VBMS notification queue, and we find so many issues with them in regards to it's confusing to veterans for sure. So we have to fix that first. Again, no wrong door at VBA has to be the attitude going forward, so veterans are comfortable and they're not punished in any way for filing the wrong form. They're asking for help for a benefit. We need to be able to help them do that as best as we possibly can, and we need to make it as easy as possible for them.
Well, let me say this to the DAV. Thank you for doing that. As a person who's went through this process several times, and the frustration, and I'm going to tell you that there's many veterans out there that give up before getting the process done. And that's wrong. You know, whenever I first got here, we did move a bill to try to improve that process, but we've got to have your help, and thank you for your help to allowing us to continue to try to make it an easy process so that it doesn't drive our veterans away and that would give up. So thank you with that, and I'll yield back.
Senator Moran.
Chairman Tester, thank you. Commander, thank you very much for your words. They were valuable and meaningful. Let me remind the DAV that Senator Sinema and I have introduced the Veterans Caregiver Reduction, Reemployment, and Retirement Act to provide caregivers with needed support as they reenter the workforce or transition into retirement once they are no longer needed as a family caregiver. Would you be willing, would the DAV be willing to take a look at that legislation and consider supporting it?
Thank you very much for that question, Senator. It's very important to many of our members. I would like to ask our Legislative Director, Joy Elam, to respond.
Joy?
Absolutely, Senator Moran. We would be happy to take a look at that. And you know how important caregivers are to our members, and anything we can do to support them and make sure that they, have every opportunity is key. Thank you.
Thank you. I look forward to working with you, Joy, and DAV in this regard. Commander Espinoza, the VA has been closing beds in community living centers, CLCs, due to an inability to find staff and to retain staff. My question is written in front of me is, do you have any concerns? I assume the answer to that question is yes, but do you have suggestions of how we can help the VA employ and retain staff and make sure that the needs of our veterans who are in community living centers, their needs are continue to be met?
I appreciate that question, Senator. It is, we do a lot for caregivers, as I mentioned in my remarks. I would like to ask our Legislative Director, Joy Elam, to give detail on that.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Long-term care, we have so many aging veterans and service-disabled veterans deserve to have options for, from home-based primary care services through, we know that no one wants to have to end up in a community living center or a nursing home, but at times that's just the reality of it. They need that support, they need that help. So being able to recruit and retain the best and the brightest to care for our nation's veterans is so key, and we'll do everything we can to work with you on that issue. We hope that this is an issue that will be taken up by Congress, because we have a number of an aging veteran population that's really going to be critical in the next decade.
And apparently an aging workforce.
Yes.
Commander, thank you. You came to see me shortly after you became commander. I appreciate that conversation and appreciate the relationship I have with you and the members of DAV. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ranking Member Takano.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commander, I was pleased to see in your written testimony that DAV supports enacting legislation that would require specific training protocols for community providers to ensure that these providers meet the same clinical competency and quality of care standards to which we hold VA providers. So my questions, I have a few questions here. What sort of training do you think is most critical for VA community providers to have, particularly mental health providers? And second, what would you say to those who question whether Congress should mandate training for VA's community providers at all?
I appreciate the question, Congressman. I would like to ask our Legislative Director, Joy Elam, to respond.
Great.
Thank you, Commander. It's an absolutely critical point to make sure that all providers, whether they're VA or community providers, have the proper training, especially in mental health. Suicide prevention is VA's #1 clinical priority, and as such, all providers in VA are trained. They're mandated and required to take training in suicide prevention efforts and lethal means safety counseling. Unfortunately, VA's network of community providers, that's not mandated. While it's encouraged, it's not mandated, but we know so many veterans use the community care network as well. We believe they should have the same requirements and mandate. Our veterans deserve no less, and with suicide, again, on the rise, that's a critical point.
Thank you. Commander, thank you for highlighting in your testimony the importance of modernizing VA medical facilities to ensure that they can best support the delivery of health care in the 21st century. For fiscal year 2024, appropriators have provided a modest plus-up of over the President's budget request, but the $2.1 billion that will be appropriated is still a far cry from the $7 billion that DAV and other independent budget VSOs are recommending for fiscal year 2025. Why are these infrastructure investments so critical? And in the absence of sufficient funding, how should Congress and VA prioritize available resources?
Thank you very much for that question, Congressman. There are many areas in VA that need modernization, buildings, equipment, et cetera. but I would like to ask our Legislative Director, Joy Elam, to add more detail.
Thank you, Commander. Infrastructure, with an aging infrastructure in VA, it's absolutely essential that Congress and VA work together to modernize the VA healthcare system. We know that on average, buildings are 60 years old or greater, and compared to the private sector, where we see more between 12 and 15 years for a facility. Infrastructure is key in recruitment, retention of good people, modernization, to have all of the IT equipment and new technologies that are available. So the modest amount in the budget is not there. We have been advocating, as you noted, $7 billion at least. VA's own SCIP plan, which is their strategic infrastructure, capital infrastructure plan, says that they need $150 billion to correct and build and modernize its system. So we've got to start making those investments. Our veterans deserve that.
Thank you, thank you. And I might know that this poll is really high with the American public. When we ask them, should we modernize these buildings, it is off the charts.
Senator Hassan.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and to you and your co-chair and ranking members, thank you all for having this hearing. Ms. Espinosa, thank you so much for being here, and to all of your colleagues. I'd like to acknowledge, I was able to meet with the New Hampshire leadership of DAV back home at the end of last week, but I want to acknowledge all the Granite Staters who are here today. And as I did yesterday, a special welcome home to Vietnam vets. We are really, really glad to have you here. Ms. Espinosa, I'd also like to thank you and your family for your military service and for your work leading DAV. In your written testimony, you mentioned the DAV's Caregiver Support Program, which provides support and resources to those who serve as caregivers for veterans. I know how important caregivers are to people who experience disabilities and how difficult it can be to juggle all of the other responsibilities that we have in life with also caring for a loved one. So, Ms. Espinosa, can you please discuss the role that caregivers play in supporting disabled veterans and how Congress can continue to support them as well as the veterans that they serve?
Thank you very much for the question, Senator. I appreciate that. We have many caregivers in our auxiliary, DAV auxiliary, and they work very hard to take care of their veterans and give them a good quality of life. The support that they need is a priority for them, whether it's the stipend or training to take care of the veterans. It's very important that they have that training and the backing of the VA to be able to provide care for their veteran.
Thank you. I also wanted to follow up on another area of your testimony. Many veterans struggle with finding transportation to and from the VA. This issue affects not only disabled veterans, but also veterans who live in rural areas without easy access to public transportation. And it's an issue that affects many people in New Hampshire. In your testimony, you described the work DAV does to provide vehicles and drivers to assist veterans with getting to their VA medical appointments. I discussed how important this work was at last year's hearing, and it's even more important now as so many new veterans will be coming to VA facilities for care they're entitled to under the PACT Act. So what can the VA do to continue to support DAV's transportation network, especially as the number of veterans coming into VA facilities increases under the PACT Act?
I appreciate that question, Senator. It is very important to us. I would like to ask our Voluntary Services Director, John Kleindienst, to respond.
Sure.
Thank you, Commander. That's a great question. The VA would need to standardize and streamline the onboarding process for volunteers and prioritize what volunteers bring to VA as a without compensation employee. The standardization needs to take place immediately, because if you go to one VA and another VA, the priority and the standardizations are totally different.
Yeah.
So that needs to change immediately. We have many people willing to donate their most precious commodity, which is time, to transport veterans to and from their appointments, and lose interest when the VA drags their feet on onboarding these volunteers.
Yeah. I appreciate that. And just to my colleagues here, this is something we hear a lot about. We lose volunteers to do this work because it takes so long and the onboarding process is so irregular. So I hope we can work on that together. Thank you.
Congressman Luttrell.
Thank you, sir. Thank you all for your service. I feel remiss if I didn't ask if there were any Texans in the room. That's what I'm talking about. Well, I'm glad you're here too, because I was going to take all of it and say there only needs to be one, and Mr. Self and I, but okay. So my question is, and reading over the information that you provided with us, I want to talk about suicide and suicide prevention and the VA system as a whole. Now, in one of my subcommittees for VA, I have the opportunity to discuss suicide prevention. And I'm not saying I make it very uncomfortable for the VA members that are sitting in front of me when we're talking about suicide prevention, because if there's anything that's I would consider broken or missing in the VA, it's our suicide prevention's capabilities, because the number continues to grow. If you peel back the onion far enough, the one thing that it continues to exponentially exceed itself is the number of veterans that are taking their lives. And I constantly get on the VA that it's their job to be proactive in preventing the loss of our brothers and sisters. But VA is a machine, a very large, capable machine, but with lots of intricacies that they also focus on, even though suicide prevention is their number one issue that they state. So, Commander, or I don't know if you're going to shift this one over to Ms. Elam, we veterans depend on our service organizations to fill the gap, whether it's retrospective, prospective information and research, to solve our veterans' problems. Veterans solves veterans' problems, plain and simple. How are you leaning forward in this problem set? Because the 10-year plan that we've passed Congresses ago that seem to think that suicide prevention is a sustainable pipeline that we can just cookie cutter, and every single individual is different. Every single person's emotional and cognitive instabilities is different. You can't treat one person like you treat the other. So I think that we need to focus in on that and lean in on innovative ideas and modalities for our veterans to solve this suicide problem. What is DAV doing on this? Are you going to go to Ms. Elam? I know you are.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Thank you very much for the question. I'll ask Legislative Director Joy Elam to respond. Thank you.
Thank you for that, those passionate comments. We agree, this is going to take all of us together. I mean, that's one thing that we're really trying to push out there. For our membership, it takes everyone to be a peer to another, to our fellow veterans. And we need to look out for each other, and we need to take action when action is needed. And we need to make sure that crisis care is available. Congress has done so much in terms of mental health and suicide prevention, a number of things. Everyone is looking at every type of solution. But again, it's going to require vigilance. And as you said, veterans will talk to other veterans. And we also know when somebody is in trouble and we need to take action, and we can't be shy or worried. We need to help right when help is needed.
And please communicate. I'm talking to every veteran in this room, and then the brothers and sisters that aren't here. You have to communicate those innovative ideas that you stumble across in our communities and share that with this panel so we can help move into the VA and let the VA be aware of it as well. Because if we don't do that, we're our own worst enemy. Sir, I yield back.
Representative Pappas.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Commander, thanks very much for your powerful testimony and the way that you related your own personal experiences through your service and as a veteran and the challenges that you faced. We're really grateful for everything that you've done and the advocacy of your team, which is terrific. Thank you to all the veterans in the room, all the survivors and caregivers and advocates who are here who help us get on track with respect to what we need to do together for America's veterans. And there really should be no party when it comes to this. We don't work for VA, we don't work for our party, we work for all of you. So we can't forget that, and we really appreciate the priorities you've highlighted today. I want to commend DAV for their campaign to highlight the need to ensure long-term care options for veterans, including seriously disabled veterans with traumatic brain injuries. While efforts to research and better understand the impact TBIs have had on veterans, they've improved in recent years, but I share your concern that not enough consideration is being given to veterans with TBIs who may ultimately require specialized long-term care, ideally within their community, due to their injuries. That's why I was pleased that language was included in the 2024 minibus that was just presented. It directs the department to continue its efforts to partner with providers to ensure that veterans with TBIs are able to receive such long-term care, specialty care in their communities. And furthermore, it directs VA to educate case managers on the resources available to provide these veterans with the specialty care they so desperately need. So I'm wondering if you could comment on what VA is doing in terms of research into the long-term effects of TBIs and the planning and provisions of long-term specialty care, and how can Congress best advocate to support these efforts?
I appreciate the question, Congressman. Thank you. And it is a very important area. I would like to ask our Legislative Director, Joy Elam, to respond.
Thank you, Commander, and thank you for that question. TBI, as we know, is going to there's going to be these long-term effects that are still completely, not known. But we have to be prepared. And VA is doing some critical research out there. We need to make sure that treatments are available. And we need to make sure we're following along with these veterans to meet their unique needs. We know that could be younger veterans that requires assisted living options. And we've recommended a number of proposals, to have a variety of complementary services to make sure that veterans with TBI can live as independent as possible, but have the support that they need to be able to do that safely.
Well, thanks very much for your response. I also want to thank DAV for being part of the coalition supporting the Guard VA Benefits Act, which is an important piece of legislation that would reinstitute criminal penalties for folks that are violating the law, these claim sharks that are taking advantage of veterans, charging them an arm and a leg for services that we know DAV and other VSOs provide and take very seriously. We should support accredited agents, not these claim sharks that are ripping off our veterans. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Senator King.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, I want to thank you for the work that you do generally, and the DAV does the irreplaceable work that you do for the disabled American veterans, but specifically for the advocacy around the PACT Act. We wouldn't have the PACT Act if it weren't for you. And I want to thank you for that work, and the benefits will be paying dividends for veterans for years to come. The second thing is I want to thank you for the rides. The transportation system in my state of Maine is so important in a rural state, and it just makes an enormous difference. I think my delegation, Steve Santos, and my delegation are over visiting on the other side of the Capitol right now, but they do fantastic work helping people to get to those appointments. And it sometimes it seems like a sort of afterthought, but it's not. If you can't get there, you can't get the help. So thank you for the service that you provide. A couple of issues. Joy, you mentioned long-term care is critical. That was the issue. We've got a wave coming at us. In Maine, we know about waves. And we've got a big wave heading for us right now in terms of long-term care, and it's only going to get more difficult. We've got problems with reimbursement rates, and we've got problems with staffing. So to the extent you have ideas or suggestions that can help us on the long-term care issue, and one thing, we had a hearing up in Maine a few weeks ago on the issue of long-term care for veterans. We need navigation help. We need people that can help veterans know what the programs are, what's available, and how to navigate what is sometimes a pretty daunting system. So I hope that you can help us with that. The other problem that we're seeing growth, unfortunately, is in mental health. We've talked about suicide. We need help with telehealth, which can be very effective in delivery of mental health. And so I'm asking you for help on these issues. The final one that I'm spending a lot of time on is transition. One of my first hearings over here, over 10 years ago on the Armed Services Committee, I listened and listened about recruiting and everything, and then I said, we should spend as much time, money, and effort on transition out as we do on recruiting in.
True that.
There are several bills pending in this conference. One is the Welcome Home Veterans, which would allow the notification to state veterans' offices. I think you're on record as supporting that. The Combat Veterans Pre-Enroll, this was particularly important for your members, so you can enroll in the VA medical system before you leave during the transition process, and then you can get medical care from day one. So I hope you'll look at that bill. And then finally, there's the TAP Promotion Act, which would allow VSO presence in the TAP program before the soon-to-be veterans leave service. So those are all things I hope you can help us with. Those are things I think we can get done this year. I want to, again, end where I began. Thank you for all you've done. Thank you for all you've done for veterans in Maine and across the country. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you.
Representative Selfie.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As an Army Green Beret, it's always an honor to sit next to my Navy SEAL brother here, and I appreciate, absolutely. And I appreciate his setup, because, Commander, in your written testimony, you highlighted the need to bolster mental health resources to prevent veteran suicide. It's a very important mission to us and the committee as a whole, the House committee as a whole. As you know, the Staff Sergeant Gordon Fox Suicide Prevention Grant Program will need to be reauthorized in the next few years. We often focus on inputs, what we're doing, what the inputs are. I want to focus on the outputs of this program. What are the results? How are they measured? Not inputs, but outputs. So who on this panel can tell me how effective has the Staff Sergeant Fox Suicide Prevention Act been in preventing suicides? How's it measured, and how do you measure it? How effective is the program?
Thank you for that question, Representative. I'll ask our Legislative Director, Joy Elam, to respond.
Thank you for that question. That's really important, and we're looking for that information as well. And I think being able to have, there's been a lot of new ideas and innovative ways to try to look for prevention, financial assistance, and trying to get at points before somebody is homeless or in crisis or spiraling down. And it's going to be key to look at the results of how those grants have been distributed, how helpful they have been in terms of the numbers of people that have been assisted. And again, how do you measure that in an effective way?
So you do not have those numbers for us yet?
Right.
Because we will need that as we
do.
discuss as a committee the reauthorization.
Yes.
Which leads me to my next question. Well, you probably don't have an answer to this. Are there ways we can improve the application process? What other additional information do you need? So I'll just leave that in your hands, because we need the effects first. In my district, I have a lot of peer-to-peer counseling organizations for veteran PTSD to suicide, the whole gamut. One of them, a Veterans Outpost, applied for a Fox grant last year, didn't get it. And I wanted to ask you about what are the challenges that you're hearing on these peer-to-peer counseling, because as you know, some veterans like to go to big VA, some like to go to a community clinic, some like to go to peer-to-peer organizations. What are the challenges faced by the peer-to-peer organizations that you know of for these grants?
Well, I would note, DAV has a charitable service trust where we've also provided grants to people within our different locations that can request a grant to do something special. And one that comes to mind was, I believe, in Arkansas, that was really effective. You know, it was a clinician who had been retired, and then got a couple of folks that wanted to work with him to go out to the community and make sure that they were talking to veterans one-on-one and contacting everyone, letting them know that they were available there. And they've felt very good about the success that they had in reaching those, and I think it's innovative ideas like that that are going to be key. And, you know, we need to continue to have that type of initiatives.
Well, I ask you to get us that information in the House Committee, certainly for the Fox grants, the effectiveness of the program. And I look forward to working with you to see how we can, if we do need to improve it, when we reauthorize it. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you. Representative McGarvey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commander Espinosa, I want to thank you for your service, both during your time in uniform and, of course, as a committed advocate for the millions of veterans and service members across the country. I also want to thank you in particular for a report you just published last week, and I found this report really interesting. You did a lot of work, and the things that went into your research, you presented a lot of really thoughtful solutions. In Louisville, I hear about the great need for mental health clinicians who are specifically trained in issues that affect women, and for therapies that consider unique life transitions and family system that affect women's overall health and well-being. As women veterans in Kentucky navigate challenges related to aging, I hear about the need for better informed VA clinicians on things like menopause. For example, when reading your report, I was really surprised to read about the correlation between menopause and suicide. And I agree that this warrants much more research and knowledge sharing between both the VA and the non-VA experts. So Commander Espinosa, I want to ask you, what are some of the specific changes that the VA can make to mental health programs and services to better meet the needs of aging women veterans right now? And what are your thoughts on how we as a committee can provide the resources and support necessary to make these changes?
Thank you very much for that question, Congressman. It's very important. One thing that comes to my mind that VA could do, the formula that's used to assess risk for suicide for all veterans is based on men's experience. Mm-hmm. If that calculation could include MST or intimate partner violence, those kind of categories should be added to that calculation. And women that have had MST are very high risk for suicide, and they should be evaluated and then reevaluated as they go along in their healthcare process. So that's one thing they could do.
Thank you. I appreciate that recommendation, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you. Representative Landsman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for all of the work that you all do, and all of the veterans and supporters here. We really do appreciate you. DAV was founded in Cincinnati. I'm from Cincinnati. So over 100 years ago, yeah, thank you, clap for that, that's exciting, yeah. Cincinnati is the first, we had the first baseball team, first fire department, DAV. I was told once that the first filet of fish sandwich was sold in a McDonald's restaurant in Cincinnati. I want to join my Republican colleagues on their questions, comments about the Fox grants. We are talking a lot about veteran suicide, as we should be, and I think your points about making sure that we're collecting data and developing supports for both men and women, right? That because of the alarming rates that we're seeing women veterans take their lives. Anyways, getting a better understanding, and Mr. Self and Mr. Luttrell brought this up, that getting a much better sense of the data. I mean, it is really important, not just in terms of additional funding and what kind of decisions we made, but like what is working and what's not working. And this is the Fox grants, hugely important, but all of the work that we're doing to try to eliminate suicides, we have to get a much better grasp of what's actually working. And so I'm curious what you would say to this question, which is, we don't really have a sense right now, whether it's the Fox grants or something else, what's working, and if we do, we're not really sharing that with our partners. Is that fair? Is it unfair? I mean, you know, it's clearly something that we're going to keep pushing on, and it's not a criticism as much as it is that we have to get serious about understanding what works and then spreading it quickly.
I agree. Thank you very much for that, Representative. I would like to ask our Legislative Director, Joy Elam, to add information.
Thank you, Commander. I would just add that I think everyone wants to solve this issue and really tackle it head-on. And the grants are going to, we need to be able to look at that data, that information, how effective they are. But we also need to know, we also look at the volume of veterans who do not use VA services. And so this is a great way with these grants for veterans in the community with peers that they may not have engaged with VA yet, but also learning about the services and resources that are available to them. Because sometimes they've been out there on their own. That might be their first contact, but definitely if they have long-term mental health issues that are serious, we want to make sure they're connected with VA from those grantees, because VA has the wraparound services and has a number of, programs that are really going to be beneficial for them in the long run.
Thank you. Yield back.
Representative Brzezinski.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, everyone. I want to first start out by thanking all the brave veterans and military members in the room for taking time to be with us here today. The veteran service organizations like Disabled American Veterans play a crucial role in ensuring our veterans are getting the care they need, understand their benefits, and protect them from the claim sharks and bad actors that Congressman Pappas was discussing. And you all serve as the catalyst between Congress and the veteran. In my first year, I just want to mention, I started my own Veterans Council, and in particular, started a roundtable regular discussion with women veterans in particular in my district. And I just have to say, as a freshman serving on the House Veterans Affairs Committee, it is truly an honor to serve on this committee and hear from you all on how we can better be serving the veterans in our communities. It was with the help of the feedback from the VSOs that I was honored to introduce the bipartisan Edith North Rogers STEM Scholarship Opportunity, H.R. 5785, with several VSOs, including DAV, having endorsed this legislation. My bill would modify requirements for the Edith North Rogers STEM Scholarship to expand post-9/11 GI Bill benefits, making it easier for our student veterans to access STEM education. And it would direct the VA to submit demographic information on denied applicants so that we can identify what gaps remain to be filled in the application process. My question for Commander Espinoza, I appreciated your testimony and DAV's support, of course, of H.R. 5785. Can you speak to why we need more veterans in the STEM fields and how STEM expansion bills like the Edith North Rogers STEM Scholarship Opportunity Act can benefit veterans, in particular women veterans, who are underrepresented in STEM fields today?
Thank you very much for that question, Representative. As a previous or a past IT person, I can really relate to the need for STEM in education. I would like to ask our Legislative Director, Joy Elam, to add information.
Great.
Thank you, Commander. I think both of you have already made the case for why it's important. Veterans deserve to have these scholarships, and especially, trying to encourage women veterans to do their graduate work and doctoral work for really careers that are essential. And we need to have women in those positions to be able to be, just like our Million Veteran Program and others, that we want to make sure that women are represented adequately, because those are big, important fields that are going to determine our future, and we need to have women there.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you very much. I yield back, Chairman.
Senator Blumenthal, you're recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to our House colleagues for being here, and to all of you for your service to our country and your extraordinary service not only in uniform but afterward. It's really exemplary and inspiring. I have been greatly heartened and encouraged by the expansion of the PAC Act. I'm sure there's been a good deal of discussion about it, to include all men and women exposed while in the military to any kind of toxic substances, whether here or abroad, whether during training or in combat. As a dad of two sons who have served, one as a Marine Corps infantry officer in Afghanistan, the other as a Navy SEAL, I'm deeply concerned about the effects of exposure to toxic substances. The effects may not manifest right away. It may be only years later, and the passage of the PAC Act and now expansion is one of the ways that we are keeping faith with our men and women who serve. But I am very concerned that many of our veterans simply don't know about it. And I would like to ask you whether there is more that we can and should do to make them aware of it, and what specifically you would recommend.
Thank you very much for that question, Senator. It is very important. I would like to ask our Service Director, Jim Marszalek, to respond.
Thank you, Commander. And great question, Senator. The outreach that VA has done as a result of the passage of the PACT Act has been pretty significant. DAV also has done significant research. We've done over 400 information seminars throughout the community just last year, informing veterans about the PACT Act and all other VA benefits they may be entitled to. We collaborate alongside VA in a lot of those as well, so they've come to some of our outreach events. I think not only the PACT Act outreach itself, but it's also brought in a lot of veterans who maybe had filed claims many, many years ago who had a distrust in VA come back. So I was just at a recent event with the Undersecretary Josh Jacobs, and he talked about a story where they were at a DAV outreach event where a Vietnam veteran heard about the PACT Act and may be entitled to benefits and came back, but had filed a claim many, many years before and was denied and didn't think that he was entitled to benefits any longer. So we have to continue doing that outreach. So DAV is going to continue doing our information seminars in communities throughout the country. It's one of our proudest programs to get out there and really talk to veterans and their spouses about entitlement.
I'd be very interested in any ongoing suggestions or recommendations you have that we can bring the attention or emphasize with the VA, because obviously you are in touch on the ground. I am in Connecticut, but you are nationwide, and I think this kind of outreach is critical. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you. And so what we'd like to say now is we want to thank the DAV for their time and efforts to bring forward their priorities. And let me say, as chairman, and I'll speak for myself as chairman, and I know the ranking member of both the House and the Senate, we're here for you. We want to advance the causes to make sure our veterans are taken care of. We would love to wave a magic wand and fix everything, but working together, we can try to fix as much as we possibly can. Remember, DOD, unfortunately, they've got jobs to do. And when they do that job, quite often our veterans need the help that VA provides to try to make them as whole as possible. We want to make sure that they continue to do that effort. And with that, we will be keeping the record open for a week for any other input you might want to have on this hearing. And with that, we will adjourn.